The gym locker room buzzed with activity, but Jungkook barely noticed. He was too focused on his reflection in the mirror. His biceps looked a little fuller today, his chest more defined, and his abs were finally beginning to peek through. He'd never thought he'd say this, but the countless hours Jimin dragged him into the gym was starting to pay off. He grinned to himself and pulled out his phone. A quick selfie wouldn't hurt, just to show Jimin how far he'd come. Turning his head slightly, Jungkook angled the phone to capture the best lighting, his sweat-soaked black tank top slung over his shoulder for added effect. Perfect. Without overthinking, he clicked on Jimin's contact and sent the photo. It was only 2 minutes later, when his phone vibrated with a message, that Jungkook realized his mistake. Looking good, Jungkook. Didn't know you were hiding all this under those hoodies. His blood turned to ice as he stared at the sender's name. Kim Taehyung. Jungkook slapped his forehead, groaning loud enough to earn a few curious looks from the guys nearby. How could he have been so careless? His thumb must have slipped, and now his innocent gym progress pic was sitting in the inbox of the hottest guy in school, the guy Jungkook had harbored a not-so-secret crush on for over a year. His phone buzzed again. You free later? We should hang out. I can show you a few tips for your form. Jungkook's jaw dropped. Was this real? Was Taehyung flirting with him? The hours following the message were a blur of anxiety and confusion. Jungkook debated ignoring Taehyung altogether, but the idea of ghosting the school's most confident and charismatic guy felt impossible. So, with shaky hands, he replied, "Sure." When it didn't take long for Taehyung to respond. That night, I'll pick you up. Jungkook nearly dropped his phone. That evening, Jungkook found himself sitting awkwardly in the passenger seat of Taehyung's sleek black motorcycle. The bad boy had shown up at his door with a smirk and a helmet in hand, his leather jacket making him look effortlessly cool. Relax, Jungkook, Taehyung said as they sped through the streets, his voice loud over the wind. I don't bite, Jungkook doubted that. Taehyung looked like someone who definitely knew how to leave a mark. By the time they reached their destination, a quiet park overlooking the city, Jungkook's nerves had somewhat settled. They sat side by side on the grass, the city lights twinkling in the distance. So, Taehyung said, leaning back on his hands, you've been working out a lot, huh? Jungkook blushed, scratching the back of his neck. Yeah. It's nothing special, nothing special. Taehyung raised a brow. Jungkook, you're killing it. You should show off more. Confidence suits you. Jungkook tucked his head, his cheeks burning. Taehyung's words were casual, but there was something in his tone that made Jungkook's heart race. And then, out of nowhere, Taehyung leaned closer. You know, he said softly, I've been noticing you for a while. Jungkook's eyes widened. Don't act so surprised, Taehyung teased, his smirk softening into something gentler. You're hard to miss, Jungkook. And now that I've got you here, I'm not letting you slip away. Before Jungkook could process what was happening, Taehyung closed the distance between them, capturing his lips in a that left Jungkook breathless. But as Jungkook walked back into his house later that night, his lips still tingling and his heart soaring, reality came crashing down. His parents sat in the living room, their stern expressions a stark contrast to the warmth he'd just experienced. Where were you? His mother asked, her tone sharp. Just out, Jungkook mumbled, avoiding their eyes. Out with his father pressed. Jungkook hesitated, the weight of their expectations pressing down on him like a stone. He knew they wouldn't approve of Taehyung, or of what he was beginning to feel. As he climbed the stairs to his room, Jungkook realized he was at a crossroads. He wanted Taehyung, but he also didn't want to disappoint his family. Could he have both? Or would he be forced to choose? The next few days were a whirlwind for Jungkook. Taehyung had made good on his promise not to let him slip away. From texts that started as casual check-ins to unexpected appearances at his locker, Taehyung had completely inserted himself into Jungkook's life. And Jungkook couldn't deny how much he loved it. "Hey, muscle man," Taehyung's deep voice startled him as he closed his locker. Jungkook jumped, clutching his books. "Do you have to sneak up on me like that?" Taehyung smirked, leaning casually against the lockers. "What can I say? I like seeing you flustered." Jungkook rolled his eyes, but the warmth spreading across his face betrayed him. "What do you want?" Taehyung. "Dinner. Tonight." "My treat," Taehyung said, straightening up and slinging an arm around Jungkook's shoulders. Jungkook froze. "I don't know, my parents, they won't know," Taehyung interrupted, his tone teasing but his gaze soft. "Come on, Jungkook. Live a little." Later that night, Jungkook found himself sitting across from Taehyung in a cozy diner, the soft hum of music and laughter creating a surprisingly intimate atmosphere. Taehyung was effortlessly charismatic, talking about everything from his favorite bands to his dreams of traveling the world. Jungkook, who was usually reserved, found himself opening up about his passion for art and his struggles to fit in. "You're different from anyone I've met," Taehyung said, his voice quieter now, his eyes fixed on Jungkook. "I like that." Jungkook felt his heart skip a beat. Taehyung had this way of making him feel like the most important person in the room. It was exhilarating and terrifying. The night ended with Taehyung walking Jungkook home, their hands brushing but not quite intertwining. As they stood outside Jungkook's house, Taehyung leaned in, his face close enough that Jungkook could feel his breath. "Good night, Jungkook," he murmured before pulling away, his smirk back in place. "Sweet dreams." Jungkook watched Taehyung disappear down the street, his heart pounding. The next morning, Jungkook's good mood was shattered the moment he walked into the kitchen. His mother sat at the table, her face pinched with worry, while his father read the newspaper with a frown. "Jungkook, we need to talk," his mother said, her voice trembling slightly. Jungkook tensed, sitting down slowly. "What's wrong?" His father lowered the paper, his expression serious. "We've noticed you've been distracted lately. Staying out late. Acting secretive. Is there something you need to tell us?" Jungkook's stomach twisted. He forced a smile, shaking his head. "No, everything's fine. Just school stuff." His mother reached out, placing a hand over his. "You know we only want the best for you, right? We raised you with strong values. Don't let anyone lead you astray." The weight of their words settled heavily on Jungkook's chest. He nodded, unable to meet their eyes. As he left the house that morning, Taehyung's text popped up on his screen. "Can't wait to see you today." Jungkook stared at the message, his heart torn. Jungkook spent the entire day feeling like he was caught between two worlds. On one hand, there was Taehyung, the confident, carefree whirlwind who made him feel alive in a way he never had before. On the other hand, there were his parents, the weight of their expectations a constant shadow over every choice he made. He hadn't replied to Taehyung's text yet. Every time he picked up his phone, guilt crept up his spine. Was it wrong to want this? to want him? By the time school ended, Jungkook had worked himself into a full-blown panic. He was so distracted that he didn't notice Taehyung waiting for him by the school gate until it was too late to avoid him. "Hey, there's my favorite gym buddy," Taehyung said, his signature smirk firmly in place. He pushed off the gate and walked over, slinging an arm around Jungkook's shoulders like it was the most natural thing in the world. Jungkook stiffened, glancing around nervously. "Tae, what are you doing here?" "Picking you up, obviously." Taehyung tilted his head, his sharp eyes studying Jungkook. "You've been quiet all day." "Something wrong?" Jungkook hesitated, then shook his head. "No, I'm fine." Taehyung didn't look convinced, but he let it slide. "Come on. Let's go somewhere fun. You could use a distraction." They ended up at a quiet lake outside of town, the late afternoon sun casting a golden glow over the water. Taehyung parked his bike and gestured for Jungkook to follow him to the edge of the dock. Jungkook sat down carefully, his legs dangling over the edge. Taehyung plopped down beside him, his knee brushing against Jungkook's. "All right, spill," Taehyung said, his tone gentle but firm. "What's going on? And don't say nothing, because I know that's a lie." Jungkook stared down at the water, his hands clenched in his lap. "It's just my parents," he admitted quietly. "They'd never understand this." "Us?" Taehyung was silent for a moment, then sighed. "I figured it was something like that." "You don't get it," Jungkook said, his voice trembling. "They have these expectations. They want me to be this perfect son who follows all the rules. They've given up so much for me, and I don't want to disappoint them." Taehyung leaned back on his hands, his gaze fixed on Jungkook. "I get it more than you think. My parents have expectations, too. They wanted me to be the straight-A student, the perfect role model. But that's not who I am." Jungkook glanced at him, surprised. "I'm not saying it's easy," Taehyung continued. "But at some point, you have to ask yourself, are you living for them, or are you living for you?" The words hit Jungkook like a punch to the chest. He looked away, his vision blurring as tears pricked at the corners of his eyes. Taehyung reached out, his hand warm and steady as it covered Jungkook's. "Hey," he said softly. "It's okay to be scared. But you're not alone in this. I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere." Jungkook swallowed hard, his fingers trembling as they curled around Taehyung's. "I don't know if I'm strong enough," Taehyung said firmly. "I've seen it. And when you don't feel like you are, I'll be strong enough for both of us." Jungkook's heart swelled, a mixture of fear and hope warring within him. Slowly, he turned to Taehyung, his eyes searching the other boy's face. And then, before he could overthink it, he leaned in. It was tentative at first, soft and uncertain, but Taehyung responded immediately, his hand coming up to cradle the back of Jungkook's neck. The world seemed to fall away, leaving just the two of them, the quiet lake, and the warmth of each other's embrace. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange, Jungkook rested his head on Taehyung's shoulder. "I don't know what's going to happen," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. Taehyung pressed the top of his head. "We'll figure it out together." For the first time in a long time, Jungkook felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, he could have both love and acceptance. Jungkook couldn't stop replaying the in his mind. The warmth of Taehyung's lips, the way his hands had steadied him, it was everything Jungkook hadn't known he needed. But as the days passed, The flicker of hope began to dim under the weight of reality. He knew he couldn't keep living in two worlds. The secret moments with Taehyung were beautiful, but the fear of his parents finding out gnawed at him constantly. He was exhausted from pretending everything was fine when his heart felt like it was being torn in two. It all came to a head one Friday evening. Jungkook's mother had noticed his distracted behavior and asked him to stay home for a family dinner. He agreed, but his mind was elsewhere. When his phone buzzed with the text from Taehyung, "Miss you. Come outside," Jungkook made a split-second decision. Taehyung was leaning against his bike when Jungkook slipped out the front door. "Couldn't stay away," Taehyung teased, but his smile faded when he saw the tension in Jungkook's face. "We need to talk," Jungkook said, his voice shaky. Taehyung's brows furrowed. "What's going on?" Jungkook hesitated, the words catching in his throat. Finally, he blurted out, "I can't keep doing this. Sneaking around, lying to my parents, it's too much." Taehyung's expression softened. "Jungkook, I get it. But running away from what you feel isn't the answer. You don't have to do this alone. I'm scared, Taehyung," Jungkook admitted, his voice breaking. "If they find out about us, they'll never look at me the same way again. I don't want to lose them." Taehyung stepped closer, his hands resting gently on Jungkook's shoulders. "I can't promise it'll be easy, but I can promise I'll be by your side no matter what. You deserve to live your truth, Jungkook. Don't let anyone take that from you." Jungkook stared at Taehyung, his heart pounding. For so long, he'd let fear dictate his choices. But maybe, just maybe, it was time to choose love instead. That night, Jungkook sat down with his parents. His hands trembled as he spoke, his voice wavering but steady. "I need to tell you something," he began, his eyes fixed on the table. "There's someone I've been seeing. Someone I care about. And it's not who you'd expect." His parents exchanged a glance, their expressions unreadable. His mother's voice was quiet but firm. "What are you trying to say, Jungkook?" Jungkook took a deep breath. "I'm in love with someone. His name is Taehyung." The room fell silent. Jungkook braced himself for anger, disappointment, rejection. Instead, his mother's voice came, softer than he'd expected. "Jungkook," she said, reaching across the table to take his hand. "You're our son. We might not understand everything right away, but we love you. That will never change." Jungkook's father nodded, though his face was serious. "It'll take some time, but we want you to be happy. If Taehyung is the person who makes you happy, then we'll try to accept that." Tears streamed down Jungkook's face as relief flooded through him. For the first time, he felt the weight of his secret lift, leaving room for something lighter, hope. The next day, Jungkook found Taehyung waiting for him outside the gym. Without a word, Jungkook ran to him, throwing his arms around Taehyung's neck. "They know," Jungkook whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "And they're okay with it." Taehyung pulled back just enough to look into Jungkook's eyes, a smile spreading across his face. "See? I told you you're stronger than you think." Jungkook laughed, his heart feeling lighter than it had in weeks. "I couldn't have done it without you." Taehyung grinned, leaning down to press to Jungkook's forehead. "You and me, Jungkook. Against the world." As they stood there, wrapped in each other's arms, Jungkook finally understood what it meant to choose love. Love for himself, love for Taehyung, and love for the life they could build together. No more secrets. No more fear. Just them, and a future full of possibilities.